Kitco News special coverage of the Future Blockchain Summit is brought to you by Cook Finance, a revolution in DeFi asset management.
I'm here with Chris Voss, CEO of the Black Swan Group and author of the well-renowned book, Never Split the Difference. Chris, welcome to Kitco.
Thanks, man. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, pleasure. Pleasure to have you here in Dubai, the Future Blockchain Summit. But you and I aren't going to be talking about blockchain per se. We're going to be talking about negotiations, how that applies to business, your everyday life, and of course, nation states. Many of our viewers want to know what's going on in the geopolitical stage states. Let's talk about your negotiation strategy. I know you've given talks about how that affects your everyday life. Let's just start from the top. Optimal strategies to negotiate, because I know you've talked about it. We're negotiating every day with our spouses, with our loved ones, with our boss, with our clients. How does that play out?
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, but hear the other side out first. And it's tactical empathy is what we talk about in the book. But in empathy in general, most people think empathy is just putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Now that's only the beginning. Once you put yourself in their shoes, then tell them what you think their perspective is, what they see, what they feel. So take the next step. After you put yourself in their shoes, see if you can repeat back to them how the world looks to them. Let them feel heard. It sounds really counterintuitive, but people don't really buy that you understand until you show them.
Yeah.
And you show them by basically repeating it back to them. And you'll be astonished at how quickly that accelerates your interactions.
It sounds to me like it might be a personality trait that the best negotiators you're suggesting could be good empathizers.
Yeah.
Of course, not everybody is. Would that be a true statement to make, that some people are just naturally more gifted at negotiating than others?
Well, I'm of the belief that there's nothing natural, that it's all learned. Like when we're born, we're pretty much a blank slate. What did you learn along the way? Now, I realize that you can't learn to be 7 feet tall, or you can't teach me how to be American professional football lineman. I'm never going to be that big.
Yeah.
But the rest of the stuff, anybody could probably learn it. And I'm a big believer that all you got to do is be willing to learn.
Right. Well, let's talk about a real life example then. Let's talk about negotiating with a client, for example. You're striking a deal, you're deciding you're deciding to buy out the company, you're deciding on the value, right? I'm the buyer, you're the seller. Let's talk about the value. How much should I be paying? How much should you be selling?
Yeah, well, my value is really going to be based on my perception of how the future is going to work out.
Yeah.
So if I'm buying from you, you're going to be taking the same perspective.
Right.
I need to get out of your head what you're seeing. And that's the whole point about empathy. I'll start guessing out loud what's in your head. You're either going to tell me I'm right, or the really funny thing about it is when I'm wrong, you'll correct me and put me on the right track. Then that creates collaboration, and then ideally we both end up with a better deal.
And of course, negotiating with your boss and a raise, that's something that most people have to encounter or do every once in a while. How does that play out?
Well, don't ask your boss for more money, ask your boss for a better future. Salary pays your bills, but it doesn't build your career.
Yeah.
And your boss is going to help you build your career if you're trying to make the company better. How do you do that? This simple phrase.
Yeah.
How can I be guaranteed to be involved in projects that are critical to our strategic future? Now all of a sudden your boss goes, wait a minute, you want to help everybody and me? That automatically makes you more valuable. Plus it gives you the opportunity to work on really important projects which will either accelerate your career in the company or give you such a great resume you can go someplace else.
Interesting. Now, John Nash won the Nobel Prize in Economics for his work on game theory. The Nash equilibrium, similar to the prisoner's dilemma, indicate that people compromise every day in their negotiations. We take the second best option for me, you take the second best option for you. Neither of us are optimally benefiting ourselves, but we come to some sort of compromise. Is that true? Have you observed that? Does that theory actually play out in real life?
Well, why do people compromise? Principally, they're trying to eliminate or minimize combat. What everybody kind of agrees on long term, that combat in negotiations is a bad idea. You got a real bad, quick downward spiral over aggressive negotiations, over winner-take-all negotiators. If you're a winner-take-all negotiator and everybody that deals with you loses, nobody wants to deal with you. So you get to a compromise as a default mode to try to minimize the pain. The problem is that's a slower downward spiral. Now, collaboration is the next step up. You don't see collaborative negotiations very many places, so people just don't know how to do it. But as soon as you learn how to do it, that's how you get into the upward spiral. How do we make a better deal? That's what I'm really after.
Let's talk about negotiations on the global stage now. Nation states, of course, are negotiating every day with each other. One of the badly. Okay, well, why do you think they're doing it badly? Let's talk about that.
Just arguments back and forth. Most world leaders, we got a saying in the United States, are preaching to the choir. They want to say things that people that come to their rallies jump up and down and cheer and scream for. The problem is the people that come to their rallies aren't who they're negotiating with. Those are their supporters. They're on their side anyway. But then it gets into a shouting match, and that's how you get into compromise with politicians. If compromise was great, every citizen would be proud of their government. Ask an American, you think your politicians are doing a great job? Doesn't matter on which side of the aisle they're on. They're going to say, no, they're doing a horrible job.
Right.
That's what compromise gets you.
Sure.
And very few people understand that expressing the other side's point of view actually makes better deals.
Right. Well, we see this in the White House all the time. They're disagreeing on a lot of things, the debt ceiling, how to fund the government, the infrastructure bill. We're seeing, a lot of examples playing out on both sides of the aisle. They're having disagreements, but what do they actually want for each other, for themselves? How do they come to a middle ground? Are they even doing a good job in coming to a middle ground? Because some people say they're not, and they're just stalling everything.
No, they've never really done a good job. And it is a stall. And I think we're coming out of the slowly coming out of the combative political environment that we had in the United States for the last 4 years. I think President Biden, he doesn't like combat. Like the one thing he did that I really liked recently was he had to come out in support of the genocide in what's known as the genocide in Turkey over the Armenians. That's been something that's been lurking there for a long time that no politicians really wanted to come close to. Now, when he finally said something in support of it, what he did well was the leader of Turkey knew it was coming. He didn't let him get caught off guard. And it's an extremely emotional issue for Turkey. Now, he's got to wade into this, but he doesn't let the political leaders on the other side of the table get blindsided by this, hear it out of the blue. So the leader of Turkey, and forgive me for not being able to say his name properly, I'd embarrass myself by mispronouncing it. The world was really surprised at how muted his response was, because President Biden didn't let him get caught off guard. He knew it was coming. So that was actually a respectful way to approach a very emotional international issue. I'm encouraged that he did that.
Well, what do you think, just on that topic, and we'll move on, what do you think was going on through Biden's head when he withdrew from Afghanistan? There was tremendous pressure on both sides to either stay or leave.
Well, it became a downward spiral for the U.S. So the U.S. had to, I'm not saying that we did it well, but ultimately the U.S. has got to get out of Afghanistan. We got no business being in that country. We've known that for a long time, haven't really been able to extricate ourselves from that. Nobody in the region really wants us there. What's America doing in another part of the world trying to tell a country how to run themselves? Overall, that's a bad idea. Now, how do we get out of that situation? Well, particularly with the previous administration putting 5,000 combatants back on a battlefield. Right. People are surprised that the government of Afghanistan and the military folded up so quickly when the previous administration dropped 5,000 combatants back on the battlefield. What did we expect those guys to do as a result of that kind of a change? It was a bad situation that had to be addressed at some point in time. Nobody said it wasn't supposed to be done. The argument is over when and how it was done, not that it needed to be done.
One of the largest geopolitical risks today, for investors at least, is the tension between US and China, the next rising global superpower economy, whatever you want to call it. I think the Chinese government have indirectly or maybe even directly stated that they want to supplant the US in both political and economic power. Of course, the Americans don't want that to happen. So we've got a bit of a stalemate, if you want to call it that. If you were in the White House, how would you be negotiating with Xi Jinping on economic, political, or even military issues?
You know, I'd actually be talking more to my top level business people, because at the end of the day, everybody wants to feed their family. They want a better life for themselves and their children. They want a nicer house. They want better education for their kids. You take that approach, you know, a business-oriented approach to solving world problems, peace through prosperity, then it changes the game. I think get out of this combative, my government's better than your government, our form of government by definition is morally superior to yours. Get out of that conversation and get into economic welfare.
But that's not what happened in the last 4 or 5 years. We saw trade wars, we saw tariffs, we saw bans and restrictions on both sides. I mean, how do we get out of that?
You got to be willing to take the first step. Now, do we have any politicians that are willing to take the first step economically? You know, as crazy as it was, you know, Trump used to always say, make America great again. You know, he once said, make Iran great again. He's like, if you guys sit down and cut a deal with us where we're not fighting each other militarily, I don't have a problem with you guys prospering economically if you're not taking money away from us.
Right.
There's enough wealth to go around in this world if politicians will just see it that way.
Let's apply your negotiation tactics to this example. So if I'm negotiating with somebody in real life, there's always a minute chance of violence or physical confrontation. I mean, it's very small, but it's non-zero. That chance is larger on the political stage when you're dealing with military powers. Is there a chance that China and the US could actually be in a military conflict because negotiations go sour?
My personal opinion, I don't think China has any interest in a military conflict. They've got economic ambitions, so does every other country in the world. Historically, they haven't been ambitious militarily in their history. Outside of China, you know, China is not sailing boats across the ocean and setting up colonies in other countries. They are very protective of what they see as their own political, their own geographical turf. Who is it? You know, as soon as we start taking looking at people through a little bit different lens, how do they see the world? And I think a lot of this becomes a lot easier to understand.
All right. Now, in your career, based on the people you've worked with and observed, who was probably the best negotiator in business, politics, or just your everyday life? And what do they do right?
I think one of the excuse me, sorry. Based on what they've accomplished, based on where they started and where they ended up, I think Oprah Winfrey is one of the greatest negotiators in the world.
All right, what did she do?
I mean, first of all, look at her net worth. And look at what are her demographics. Black female, I think from Chicago, starting a low income environment. She started with less than zero. And where is she today? Plus the other thing that a lot of people miss about Oprah is, who do you know that's had an argument with her publicly that's lasted? Oprah's into long-term relationships. She's into collaborating with people. There's no way that people haven't been unhappy with her. There's no way that she hasn't been unhappy with other people. Do you hear about it? She knows that open-air arguments, leaving people feel bruised, is a bad idea. So she doesn't do it. I'm really impressed with what she's accomplished in her life.
She should be at the blockchain conference. You know, she'd do well. You get free Bitcoin. You get free Bitcoin. Everybody gets free Bitcoin. Yeah, that's a very interesting take. How do we apply her life lessons to somebody who wants to succeed in their business career?
You know, actually in the Black Swan Group, we've got a rule we call the Oprah rule.
Okay.
Which is the last impression is the lasting impression. And I heard this directly from one of the people that, a friend of mine is Cindy Morey. She's been Oprah's booker for 19 years. I met her in LA, we're sitting around talking about this. She says, most entertainment industry people in a limo, out in a taxi. When they want something from you, they treat you like gold. They're nice to you. As soon as they have it, you know, they forget about you. Excuse me. Oprah's rule was in a limo, out in a limo. No matter what happened with her, everybody, especially when they left, had to feel that they were treated with respect and in high esteem. And I have been told that in several pointed conversations that Oprah's had with highly volatile celebrities, her last line has always been, understand that no matter what happens, I will always love you and I will always support you. The last impression is the lasting impression. No matter how combative the interaction with is, if you finish with genuine positive regard, that's how you end up a billionaire.
Wow, great. Now, finally, I know you've talked about this before on your own shows and your own interviews and speeches, but I know you've worked with the FBI. How do you know that somebody is lying?
You know, it isn't that hard to tell that somebody's lying. The hard part is getting them out of it. You know, people have a tendency to lie defensively. They don't know how to tell the truth because the truth is harsh. That's why there's a counterfeit yes. Do you want to do this deal? Yeah, really when I want to know more about the deal. So how do you make people feel safe so that they can tell you the truth? Actually, take your time. As a general rule, somebody's lying the more they talk, the more they try to convince you. We call that the Pinocchio effect. You know, Pinocchio's nose got longer every time he told a lie.
Right.
Well, the more people talk, they know they're lying, so they work harder to convince you. So it tends to correlate with someone who's deceiving you. The harder they work to convince you because they're worried that you're not going to believe them because they know they're lying.
Yeah.
It's not that hard to spot a liar. The hard part is if you're lying just out of sheer defensiveness, not because you're trying to cheat me, because you're afraid to tell me the truth.
Right.
How do I get you to tell me the truth? And what it really boils down to is, if I'm not going to hurt you with the truth, if I'm just trying to collaborate with you to get a better deal for both of us, then it becomes okay for you to tell me the truth.
Sure. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I didn't take psychology in university. Do people lie a lot? Is it part of human nature to tell the truth or to lie?
People lie a lot defensively. Like they don't know how to say no gently. Or if there's a difficulty, they're worried about disappointing the other person. They're worried about disappointing them. They're worried that they're going to get angry. You know, the phrase, the white lie. You know, you're telling somebody something that's not the truth to protect them. In your view, you're trying to protect them or the relationship.
Doing them out of this sense of benevolence.
As crazy as it sounds, it's it exactly. They're trying not to hurt the other person because they think the truth hurts. And they don't realize that the lie is going to hurt much more long term. So getting people out of that is really getting people to trust each other.
Is that an important skill to have to be a successful politician, business person, to try to get the truth out of somebody? Is that something you advocate for?
Well, successful politician, it's almost an oxymoron, right? You know, how many what are you looking for there? But a successful business person, yeah, really does tell the truth. I did an interview with Mark Cuban recently.
Yeah.
You know, we're both involved in another social media platform called Fireside. He's an investor and a founder, and the people that are running it are friends of mine. So I interviewed him, and we talked about being honest, and we talked about telling the truth.
Yeah.
And he says, yeah, because I want people to continue to do business with me. You know, I want them to make another deal. And not only do I want them to make another deal with me, I want to accelerate the deal-making process. So you gotta tell the truth so that you make the deal and then the other side trusts you, and the next time out, the deal process is accelerated. So really learning to tell the truth is a success trait.
Okay. And finally, before I let you go, Chris, there's a lot of young people watching our show, Gen Zs, millennials perhaps. If you could, I know life advice is pretty broad, but if you could go back and talk to your younger self, let's say your 20-year-old was here at this conference today in 2021, what would you tell him? What would you tell younger Chris?
Yeah, you know, take it easy on yourself. You know, don't be afraid of failure. Every mistake is a learning accelerator. And actually, you know, what does an old guy like me know that you're gonna learn? There's no such thing as arriving. You know, I used to think when I was younger that I would achieve a level of success and that I would arrive. And I don't know where we get this idea, but you get to a place and you've made it. And as long as life remains interesting, you never arrive. It's always getting more and more interesting, and you're going to make mistakes. And every mistake that you make, if you embrace it, is actually going to give you greater capabilities.
Chris, it was an absolute honor to have you on the show. I really appreciate everything you've said. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for watching Kitco News. We'll have more for you. Stay tuned.
Kitco News special coverage of the Future Blockchain Summit is brought to you by Cook Finance, a revolution in DeFi asset management.